Welcome to Reality of Faith and Wisdom podcast number 10. We believe that real faith and life's wisdom, understanding, and everything that you need is found on the one platform, and that is Lord Jesus Christ. I believe because of Him, I live the life that I live. Now, all you young people, you need to pay attention today specifically. My guest on this podcast is our associate pastor, Pastor Matthew Richard. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. And
I want to talk about really how to grow your faith, sustain your faith, how to, here's a story that I have to start with before I go into it. 4 years ago, Pastor Matthew showed up here, and we were lunching church. Pastor Matthew, he wasn't a pastor back then. He showed up here on his bike that was falling apart, that were almost falling apart. Didn't have a place to live. He just answered the call, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to go and help you lunch at church." And when he was coming here, my wife walked into our apartment where we lived, and she said, "Man, I just saw this young kid. It's 22 degrees on the bike, warming his hand on the engine." And I said, "That might be Pastor Matthew. I'm going to meet him." He wasn't pastor, but he is pastor now, so I'll refer to him as a pastor. That might be Matthew. I'm going to go meet him. And sure enough, it was Matthew at 22 on January 22nd, 1917, I believe, at 22 degrees, coming here to plant a church with me. And his life went from just having a bike that was falling apart, nothing else, to now he is a pastor in the church, running a business, his business, and business is growing like crazy, having a beautiful wife, now having a kid on their way. And I look at within this 4 years, I mean, Pastor Matthew, you're 26 now, right? You're 26. You were here, you came here when you were 22. From 22 to 26, life just changed 100%. That doesn't mean you're not going to have failures. That doesn't mean you're not going to have some circumstances in life, some things, uncertainty. You will have all that. But if you zoom out and you look at your life, man, I'm blessed by it. I'm blessed by it. And here's what I want. I want you to tell everybody. Now, how do you sustain your faith? And how do you grow your faith? How did you answer this call? And it's many questions, but let's start with this one. What helped you answer this call of obedience to coming here first? And how were you managing? Because there's so many kids out there, I believe, they don't have dreams anymore. They don't dream. They don't have any goals. They just live life. And I believe that they're just being swayed from one side to another without their voice, without their reasoning. So tell me a little bit about your beginning stages and how you approach this thing called life.
Yeah. It's crazy because I don't even know really how I got here. And my wife's pregnant right now. We're going to be having a baby girl. We just found out the other day.
You're going to call her Yuriy, yeah? Because I found out Yuriy in Asia is a girl. I mean.
No, I know you've presented that request. It's probably not going to happen.
Okay.
It'd be too awkward.
All right.
Our wives already have the same name. I don't know if I can have someone named Yuriy in my family right now. But I don't really know how I got here. Like I would love to tell people that there's like some secret formula to put your life on the track of where you want it to be, and like, but I don't think there really is. I think if I was gonna try and say one thing that really got me from where, because I got on fire for God, and I like, you know, I had my old life, all my old junk of doing stupid crap and drugs and partying and all that. And I had a youth pastor that I reconnected with him, and he just really walked me through, you know, getting my life back on track, starting a relationship with Christ. I didn't know, you know, I grew up in church, but didn't really like have my own faith. And, I ended up living with him and his family, and it was the best experience. I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for their family taking me in, loving me, showing me, just walking with me. And he said something that I think took me probably 2 to 3 years to actually understand what he said. And he would always just tell me, Matthew, just be faithful. Like, just be faithful. And we know that God is faithful all the time. And he just, like, I didn't comprehend that. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's good. Like, okay, I understand. Like, be faithful, do the right things, follow God. Like, just be faithful. And I used to think that was me do all the right things a lot of times. And faithful, to me, is not always, hey, I need to do all the right things, but learn to turn back around. Like, when I get off track, like, realign with God and refocus on Him. And he's like, it's one of those profound things that is like this little statement that you like, it's like reading the Bible and you read a scripture and then you don't get it for like years. Yeah. I mean, years. Yeah. And then finally one day it's like, why have I never read that? I've read this verse 50 times. And that's kind of how that statement was for me, just remain faithful. And it wasn't until I realized, like, I had been faithful enough, whether that's in my failure, whether that's in my screw up, whether that's in the good things, the bad things, whether that's in my relationships and my business, like, I had been faithful enough to just pursue God, walk with God, that I started to see, not a great statement for spiritual, but return on investment, that, like, I began to see my faithfulness, like God honoring my faithfulness and continuing to build my life. And I think it's kind of like a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. Like, you have no clue. I moved here 4 years ago and I had zero idea of what I was doing. I was like, I literally had an encounter with God, started my relationship with Him, just got on fire for Him. I was chasing after God. And I was like, what do you have for me? What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Like, what do you have for my life?
But it's important. I mean, you're starting your journey with a mentor. You gave your life to God, and maybe you even haven't, but God sent you somebody, a mentor. So would you say to all young people today that might be listening to this, that they need to have not only mentor in heaven, but they need to have someone that they look up to, someone that they see a track record. The Bible says you will see them by their fruit, right? And that, all right, you're going to be my mentor. I'm going to look up to you. I'm going to try to spend some time with you. I mean, is that, because right now that's your success now because of that successful beginning of a mentor in your life.
Yeah, I think it becomes like a really cliche thing that the statement of, you become like the people you surround yourself with, but it's true, like 100%. And I think it's overused and it doesn't have the maybe strength behind it that it should, but it is. And I was in a group of people that was just full of party. Like, nobody was thinking about our future. Nobody was thinking about what's next for us. Nobody was thinking, at least I wasn't.
Well, if you weren't, and the people that you hang around, I mean, that's...
Yeah.
It's just a chain of effects and chain of thoughts, yeah.
And so everything was kind of, I don't know, I had brokenness in me, because I was far from God, or I was turned away from God. And I got submerged in a culture and a family. Like, I mean, I live with them. They're 3 kids, like, in their spare room. Like, it was pretty, I was completely submerged in their culture. I'd ride with Pastor Joe to the church, spend time at the church. Like, I got completely submerged in that. And without me realizing it, I just began to develop the same habits they had. Like, everything was looked at through the lens of Christ, through the lens of God. And just over time, it didn't happen overnight. Like, over time, it began to just change the way I think, change the way I act. I mean, number one, that it was me reading my Bible, pursuing God, all these practical things.
You have to put some work into it. You got to, yes.
but I never would have got there if I hadn't had that. So I think 100%, like, if you don't have someone that you're looking up to, you're being affected by some kind of culture, some kind of people, something in your environment, in your world is affecting you. And so just be conscious of who those people are that are maybe not even speaking into your life directly, but speaking around your life that is being input into your mind, into your heart. And
without you realizing.
And make sure those are people that you look up to, like people that you admire, people that you want to be like, people that show you godliness, show you in whatever area that you feel like you need to grow or God wants you to grow. If God has put a business in your hands to do that, surround yourself by people that you admire their business model. You admire how they do business from a godly perspective. Same in spiritual.
So there might be some people that are listening to it right now, and they're like, okay, I need to find a mentor. How would you? Because God gave you a mentor, but how would you? What would you recommend to people that maybe don't have that, maybe don't have a mentor in their life? You know, what would their steps looks like? Because I know how pursuant you are. I mean, you pursue people. I mean, every new people that come to our church, you're almost the first one to see them and go after them. So share that side of you.
It starts by just getting over your uncomfortableness.
That's a great revelation right
like,
there.
Just get over it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of insecurity when I came here. It was hard for me to communicate with people. I had in my head, what I repeated in my mind was that I can't communicate with people. Like, I don't know how to hold a conversation with someone. I feel like, if I were to approach somebody that I respect, I mean, it all has to do with my insecurity in reality. Yeah. But I would approach somebody that I admire, I look up to, I honor them, and feel like I don't bring any value to them. And what I've realized is that, the most encouraging thing for me is when someone comes to me and is like, hey, can you help me with this? Hey, what's your opinion on this? Would you try and give me a little bit of wisdom in a step or a process that I should make in my life? And so I think an encouragement to that is understand that people that may be ahead of you, we all want that person. Like we all want that person,
and we all are insecure. I mean, all. Yeah.
No matter how far we make it, we all want that person that like we can do life with, we can go through life with. And it's like we've been through it. Like, and I don't even know that I can say that I've been through it. I feel like as I go through life, the season that I thought was a big deal wasn't that big of a deal, and I get to the next season, like we're about to have a child, and it's like, okay, what do I have no idea that I'm prepared for right now?
And you're never ready. You just gotta believe God and jump in. You can see all the core courses about how to be a father, this and that, but you're never ready. There is no such a thing as, all right, you are ready. I think that's how life is in a way.
But we have a lot of, like, in our church, like 19, 20-year-old young people that I've got to do life with through our youth group, and it brings me so much honor for them to come and ask, hey, what should I do? What's the step that I should take? And so the practical step of that is get out of your comfort zone, and someone that you look up to, like, just go initiate a conversation with them, because they're probably gonna be way more receptive to that conversation than you actually think they are. In your own mind, you're like, nah, they're not gonna wanna talk to me. Hey, they're not gonna wanna go have a cup of coffee with me, whatever. And show up to that meeting with a question. Show up to that meeting with something like don't be afraid to ask for help.
Something that you want to learn.
Yeah, like, hey, I admire this that you do. I admire how you walk with God in this way. How do you do that? What's that like for you? And come, because that is not just adding value to you in your life and imparting wisdom into you. It's adding value into them. It's a satisfaction to know that something that God has done in my life, I can now pass that on to somebody else, And a lot of times they don't have to go through the same junk that I had to go through to learn that lesson, you know?
But it requires a level of humility, because when you're young and you're especially in your early 20s, you think like, you know everything. I mean, you know answer to everything. Like, hey, Mr. President, let me tell you how to do your job. You know what I'm saying? But then when you get older, you realize, I have no clue about this thing called life. And so it requires a level of humility to come before somebody and say, listen, how do you do this thing? How do you get out of it? So that's great. But I'm gonna go back to your story. What was going through your mind? Okay, you lived in. I'm going to retract back even more so people understand your story. So Pastor Joe Martin, he's in Bayside. You lived there. You lived in Bradenton. By the way, Pastor Joe, you impacted my life. I won't say everything on camera, but man, I'm just going to say that the moment I walked into Bayside and I was walking by, you said, Yuriy, you look like, and was like, man, that dude is good, and he doesn't have no insecurity. So anyway, just giving you a little bit of thumbs up. God is doing some great things in your life. But you live in his house and became almost part of the family. Yeah. Now you met this guy named Yuriy in Bayside, and we had a meeting about planning a church. And you decide, now I'm going to relocate from Bradenton to here, even though this was was your home because you grew up in Panama City here. We're in Santa Rosa, 30 minutes away. And now you're on your bike in January 22nd at 22 degrees Fahrenheit, cold as heck. What was going through your mind, man? What was going through your mind? And like, what am I signing? Because you're talking about being uncomfortable. Go and talk to somebody. You were going to meet with me.
Oh yeah, and it was scary. It was exactly that thing that I'm talking about. Like, okay, here's this dude that is like starting a church. Like, I'm this kid that's been walking with God for almost 2 years, and like, it was extremely uncomfortable. The first time I went up to you at church, like, that was probably the initiation. Like, all these things where I'm at in my life today started in little tiny steps. It was the little step of me getting up and walking across the row at church to go talk to you because I had saw some little Facebook clip that you had recorded. Coming here, it was like, okay, I don't think it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with I was chasing after God, and I don't want to just pull a God card on that, really, nothing else mattered. Like, the ability for me to face my fear or face my insecurity was that I knew God was drawing me to something. Like, and maybe I didn't even fully know what that was. Like, I look back on riding the motorcycle over here, and we laugh about that, and it's hilarious. Yeah. And it's like, it seems crazy when I look back on it. But there was no other option when I was in that. There was no other alternative. It was literally follow God and try to find the route that he has for you. Like, I didn't know what that route was. I had a couple options on the table of could have gone back onto the mission field, could have come here. And I just was like, okay, God, like, which way do you want me to go? And got outside of my comfort zone, went and had a conversation with you, like everything that you sat down and we talked about, the first cup of coffee, you know, I was like checking my backpack for my journal, make sure you hadn't stole it, you know, like all the things that God had been speaking to me, you kind of laid out in one cup of coffee. And I was just like, wow, that all happened. This escalated very fast. But I was just pursuing God. Like, I really was, and I was curious, I was hungry. I think that life hadn't happened enough. Like, we talk about childlike faith. Life hadn't happened enough for me to, like, even be aware of the possible bad outcomes that could happen. Like, I had an immature faith, but I had so much of it. Yeah. There was no other options. It was just chase after God and I believe he's going to do something.
And whatever the door is opening, I'm going to go right to it.
Yeah.
Your life is full of consistencies, and I want to talk about that too. But you said something that just kind of reminded me of the story. You said I was going, and I did not really know where I was going, what I was going to do. It's a story of Abraham. God called him out of Ur of Chaldean, and he was going. And actually, I'm going to be preaching this Sunday about that just a tiny bit. But what God showed it to me, that blessing follows the obedience, really. And because God says, he called him out, and then he said, I will bless you. And now I see your life almost in exactly the same way. You were going somewhere, and you did not know what's waiting for you, but what was waiting for you is all these blessings.
Yeah.
And young people get it. When you follow God, when you truly obey God, and you're consistent, because, man, you challenged me. I'm going to say this out loud, and many, many times you'll hear me say, I needed you just as much as maybe you needed me. Yeah. Because, man, when you were coming and meeting to these prayer meetings that we had on Mondays, man, you were the first one there. You always try to beat me to it. I'm like, oh, I'll be there 30 minutes before, and Pastor Matthew shows up an hour before. And I'm like, I was mad at you, man. I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to be here. I was supposed to be here first. And then I showed up 45 minutes before. You're there again. And so we need one another, that accountability. And it's not just in years and everything. Sometimes the immaturity of your faith was building somebody who had some faith, so it's never the experience, but it's your obedience. God, I'm going to do what, and when you're obeying just like a child, you will build other people around you and encourage others, and you have encouraged me a lot. But now let's go back to this consistency. You have a crazy consistency, and that's encouraging me. You do have consistency. Sometimes we walk away. We come back. There's seasons. But what helps you to be like that? Because you ask some people, hey, would you volunteer? Or they come to you and say, hey, I want to volunteer. And then you see their consistency is all over the place. I'm just going to say that discouraged me. This last 3 years of our church, it discouraged me that people say, I'm going to do this thing, and then they don't show up for a month, and then they come back again. They don't show up for a month, then they come back again. And I'm thinking, if you would have done that to your employer, you would get fired. But you do that to God, and you are kind of proud of that. Like, God, I showed up. It's once a month, but I showed up. You should be like, pat me on the shoulder and say, I'm good. I'm going to be real here on this podcast. But you were opposite of that. And what sustains you? Like, tell me your formulas. Because even me, man, I have to tell myself, okay, finish what you started, finish what you started, finish it. Because many things I've started and I haven't finished.
Yeah. Well, and it might appear that I have some kind of consistency in my life. In my own mind, I'm analyzing myself, and I'm very aware of my inconsistencies. I'm very aware of the areas where well, not always, but I'm aware of some inconsistencies that I have, and as humans, we can cover those things up and hide those things and hide it from the rest of the world. But I think that the reason that I'm able to be consistent is because it's not about me. Like those things of serving and because we want it our way, we want it comfortable for us. We want it the easy way. We want the path of least resistance in our life. Mm-hmm. And I'm able to keep on, because sometimes, when I was a young person, I wanted everything.
When I was young, you're still young,
yeah,
man.
Well, okay. Well, when I'm 20 years old, It was like I wanted all the glory moments without any of the valley moments. I wanted all the just best moments that and I couldn't handle difficulty. It would short circuit my brain of God has completely abandoned me and I'm alone, and what have I done wrong that God has left me, and really seeing my consistency came from really it not being about me and my failure and my mess ups, but it became about other people. It became about God. If I serve and if I'm doing the things that I'm doing for you, you're the lead pastor of the church. If I'm doing it for you, I'm going to be way less consistent than if I do it for God. Absolutely. If I have a healthy reverence for God. Like, I think it comes
That
from-
should be number one.
Yes.
Yeah, that should be number one above everything else. I think we should have reverence for people, for God, but that's a great foundation to have. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that God places authority over your life, and God may work through you to speak something into my life that I need to be able to receive from you and not think that I know better or I know the way to do it. But like in serving, I have to constantly, like, the consistency, the appearance of consistency doesn't happen in the outward natural thing. It happens in the consistency of my mind to realign myself in the right place of, God, I understand that I'm doing this for you right now, and whether it's good, bad, or ugly, like that, this is what you have for me today, and I'm gonna walk through that, and I trust you, and I believe that this is. I've had to walk through like some challenging things for me. Like I think it's relative to who we are. Like what was difficult for me, maybe for other people, like have lived a lot more challenging lives. But for me, what was challenging is now the biggest foundation that I've built on, and so consistency really is determined on what you do when it's difficult, not whenever everything is amazing.
So can I ask you this? Because when you're saying this will what really pops in my heart right now. Can your inconsistency reflect your relationship with God?
100. Yeah, I mean, not can it? It does.
That's because when I analyze my life, the times that I was inconsistent is the time when I was inconsistent with God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if I can look at your life and evaluate your life, and at some point, that's going to retrace back to your relationship with God. Whether that's you're having issues in your marriage, whether you're having issues with your kids, whether you're having issues with relationships, friend group, whatever, like whatever that is, it's going to trace back to your relationship with God. Are you tuned in? Are you checked in? Are you walking with Him? Not to say that you're going to be on cloud 9 all the time, because you won't. No, it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, I had to burst the bubble, but like you got to walk through God and be faithful in every season. But yeah, it all traces back. If I ever I don't realize it. I don't realize that I'm off track with God, and then I start experiencing tension in areas of my life, and then once I don't want to fix what's going on, or I'm not aware of it till I start seeing my inconsistency manifest in bad results that I don't like. My procrastination builds and builds and builds till like I can't sustain it anymore. You know, I can't last minute throw it together anymore. I can't talk my way through it anymore. I can't, and then that's when I'm like, crap, I have an issue. And I decide to get out of myself and turn around and refocus on God. Okay, God. I always start from, I'm annoyed at God because why did I end up here? And then you come to God and He's like, well, yeah, but I've been trying to show you that if you can just go this way and focus on me, Holy Spirit will guide you in the things that you need to do, and direct you and protect you from things that you didn't even realize you needed protection from.
Yeah,
like,
that's a big one.
Like one of the young guys in our church grad the other day, like he was late to church, and he's never late to church, and like never. And so it's weird when he doesn't show up, and whenever I was like, why are you late? And, I was able to encourage him because it showed me his consistency. He has great consistency.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's the exception. Like people, like it's a frustration sometimes because people's consistency is their inconsistency. Yeah. Like it's their habits. It's the way that they live their life. They're constantly operating in inconsistency. And so it's frustrating us as leaders, pastors, anyone, with your parents, with kids, whatever. Like, it's frustrating, and you're just trying to break through people's inconsistency. And like, man, God has so much more for you if you would just, honor God and play your part in what God's trying to do, because we have a part to play. And so I was able to encourage him that, like, hey, it's okay that you were late, because that's the exception. And just don't, like, because you are consistent. There is a time that you're going to fall short. And so, yeah, the consistency is such a key part
of our life in general. But you mentioned something about failure. When we fail, what do you do in those moments? What would you tell young people? All right, I've been consistent and I failed, or I've been trying to do my best and I failed. Because failure is inevitable. I mean, you need it. You need it. I realize I need failure for God to kind of cut things away, for me to realize that I still want to grow my life versus the one, Philippians 1:6, the one who started good work in you will finish it until Christ come back. And so what do you do in times of failure? Because you mentioned this to me earlier, because the righteous will fail 7 times and will back up, but the wicked one will fall and stumble.
Don't look at it from a negative lens. Look at it instead of, God, why is this happening to me? God, what are you doing in my life? Like, what are you trying to grow me in? What are you trying to develop me in? And then, like, just don't stop. Just keep walking forward.
Get back up.
Like, that's it. Like, let me tell you to read your Bible and, maybe devote a little bit more time to prayer, or, get plugged in at a small group, come to church on Sundays. Like, all of those things,
focus on
those 100%, like you have to. But in the, like, if I'm going to tell someone, like, I can't give you your practical step. Like, I don't know what God's doing in your life. I don't know everything about the way that you think, your heart, your relationship with Christ. And for some person, they just might need to get in their car and listen to worship music on the way to work instead of listen to death metal, I
love it, absolutely.
And I mean, nothing's wrong with either in some ways, I mean, whatever is for you.
Yeah.
But
don't focus. Get back.
Yeah, just don't stop. Like, don't let yourself be subject to this world and to all the things that are going to beat you down or try and beat you down, because they're going to try. Like, no matter all these people that you look up to, all these, like, mega people that are on some kind of platform, behind a microphone, on your screen, whatever, like, they didn't get there. Let me just say it like this. They didn't get there because they're any better than you.
No.
They got there because they didn't give up. And yes, God has an anointing on their life, and God has a purpose that leads them there. And your purpose may not be the same as theirs, but it's not. I mean, not may. It isn't. Yeah, you have your own purpose.
That's what it all boils down to calling. It's just their calling, and they have their own failures, their own inconsistency. We're all human beings. We have a flawed nature, and that's right. But you have your own calling. You have your own call.
Yeah. In some ways, I think that if we're talking about faith, I think your calling is only as big as you think it is. Like, because you can't outgrow like how the size of your thinking in a lot of ways. Like, God is always in my life constantly expanding that thing of like how big I think God is. Because the more I realize who God is, the more I walk through life, the more I don't know, the bigger he gets, the more profound he gets, the more of a mystery the gospel is, the more I understand of it. And so, but I always think like, I used to think that like being a pastor was the end goal for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, because
I'm just gonna laugh. That's all I'm gonna do.
Like I was 22 years old, and it was like, God, I want to do this, and I felt like God had spoke that over my life. He had spoke that to me, and actually I journaled it, and wasn't until a whole year later that I had realized and went back through there and realized God had spoke that to me. But I had this dream, and it took so long, like it seemed so far off. It seemed like such a huge deal to me, and God is just a drop in the pond. It's just a little piece of the puzzle. And so my encouragement to young people is, now you can take it to the other side and just go out and pursue all your own dreams and pursue all you want to do and all you think your life should be. And that's going to end up so unfulfilling and so unsatisfying. But pursue the things of God, and don't limit God. Like, you think that God can't do anything with you, and it goes back to that conversation of someone that's a mentor to you. Like, you're not doing anything. God is doing everything through you. And it doesn't matter if, you're somebody that got saved on the street yesterday and you have the opportunity to speak to someone and can radically transform somebody's life. Or you've been a pastor for 30 years, 50 years, your entire life walking with God. Like, it's God doing the work through us, and it can't be us doing the work.
And we all have a room to grow. All of us. It doesn't matter where you are in life, how old you are, how young you are. We all have a room to grow. And God will challenge things in your life, things that you haven't thought about. Yeah. You think you're going to be happy. And I've said this many times. I've lived American dream. I've had everything. I've traveled the world. I still do. I love my life. That's nothing. Yeah. That's nothing. I mean, what's the difference between a guy who's making a $200,000 a year or let's say $100,000 or $300,000? A bigger vacation, maybe a little bit longer vacation, a bigger car. I mean, I've had over 130 cars in my life. Now I drive $4,000 beat up Jeep Liberty that takes me from point A to point B, man. I'm just as happy, man. It's not about what you have, but it's about the purpose in your life that you can live out. Man. And going back, because we're going to close our podcast, getting to the end of it, man, now God radically blessed your life in this last 4 years. I mean, radically, you got hired on staff here in church. You became a pastor. God gave you your wife. You're waiting for your daughter to come in next February 21, right? Am I right? And you're running your business that about to, break through 100,000 in sales this year, right? About that. And it's like, have you ever thought about that God's going to do all these things? I mean, you're going to have a business, you're going to be a father, you're going to be a pastor, you're going to be all these things. Because when you have them, they're irrelevant. They're nothing. But when you step back and see the blessing, you're like, God, wow. Yeah. Like, have you ever thought about that you're going to be sitting today doing a podcast 4 years later, and you're going to be where you are today?
No clue. I mean, man, if you knew my life before Jesus, like, I should not be here, period. Flat out. Many times, just so much stupid stuff. And so to look at my life where it's at now, man, I say this sometimes, I'm spoiled rotten. Like, I don't realize how much God has blessed my life like crazy. And it's not about my consistency. It's not about, I play a factor in that, but it's about the faithfulness of God, the love of God that's on our lives. And if we're just willing to walk with Him and bring Him in. And it goes back to my small thinking. It was like, if I reach pastor level, like,
I'm going to be somewhere, man.
It's going to be good, and I'm going to be 25, and I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to be happy forever, and then I'm going to get married. And
then you realize ministry involves people.
Yeah. If that's not the truth, I don't know what is. And then that wasn't enough, I love what I get to do. I really do. And it's been amazing and beautiful to get to be part of our church and see God change people's lives and be part of that and play a small part in people coming to know Him and lives being transformed and people experiencing freedom. But what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just sit down now and be a pastor and just kind of chill out right here? No, God brought me a wife, and now we're building marriage. Now we're building family. We just, started business almost 2 years ago, and like God always has more for us. Yeah. Like I think that's what is a great encouragement for me, and probably to young people, is God has way more for your life than you realize. Yeah. And like so much more. And just believe that sometimes, like make yourself believe that. And like faith, you think all these OG Christian like guys that have made it, or people that have made it, or that are this great example, like you don't think they tell themselves to believe sometimes. You haven't been there yet. Yeah, it's like sometimes you got to whip yourself into shape and say, okay, God, my natural, I don't believe this, but you're going to do something. Yeah. And I'm going to step into that. And that's real faith.
And that's the difference between this prosperity gospel that everybody's, sometimes you hear it that, oh, God's going to give you all these things. It's not about the things. I never once heard from your mouth that I want to have this. God's going to give me all this. No, you were just looking at God for who He is in your life, for who you are as a child of God. And you were fearlessly running after Him with obedience. And there was a lot of bad stuff that happened along the way. Yeah. We all have that. We had challenges, but you never gave up. And byproduct of obedience, now God had His hand upon your shoulders, and He blessed you with all these things. And so as you hear this story, Pastor Matthew's 26, the life is to come. It's just the beginning. Yeah. And what God's gonna do in your life is you can't even imagine or think, Ephesians 3:20. So young people, rewatch this podcast a couple of times. Come up to Pastor Matthew, for those who are living here, and say, hey, can you be my mentor? Because that's what you need in life in order to succeed. Crazy, when you obey God, truly, with all your heart and all your mind, a crazy blessing will follow. Pastor Matthew, thank you for being on this podcast.
Right, thank you.
Man, you uplift me, you encourage me till today, and thank you for being in my life.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Before
we
close?
Yes.
For young people, this is my encouragement to you. Do the thing that challenges you the most. Do the thing that scares you the most. Do the thing that, and this, humble yourself before God. That, God, I'm willing to do something that has no title behind it. I'm willing to do something that I'm willing to clean the toilets. I'm willing to, whatever that thing is, I'm willing to just serve you in all the small things and the things that seem insignificant, that is not a big deal, because that thing right there just compounds on itself and takes you to the place where God really wants you. But it starts in those little things. It starts in humbling ourselves to be willing to do whatever. Be willing to do whatever God asks you to do, and He will take you to the place that you never imagined for your life. So thanks for having me on the podcast,
Amen.
man. I truly appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Love you, man.
Love you too.